Oh, and now it's trying to restart. Okay. Hello, how are you guys doing tonight? I am just a minute or two early, mainly because I didn't feel like sitting here for 2 minutes. So, how are you guys doing? What are you up to? I'm going to go ahead and get started on a water update. Okay, so I have been at 32 for probably a month and a half for ounces. Pretty well with that in the last week, probably partially because of heat. I did go ahead and up that a little bit last night. I don't know, maybe 4 ounces. I don't think it was a full cup. So I do think I am going to add another 8 ounces on and try to get up to 40 ounces a day, mainly because it is getting hotter. It is summer. I am having issues with the heat and bugs because there are mosquitoes. I really need to get screens fixed. But I figure I'm doing fairly well on the water. I should be able to push through with the hives, because I'm going to have hives anyways from mosquito bites. You would think of, hey Cassie, how are you doing tonight? But yeah, so that's where I'm at on the water. I do have water today. I have started working on, or I guess I had milk with medicine this morning. My brain is not quite functional today. It's been rather, and energy stuff was wonky last night. So I think it's still probably a little wonky. And then I wound up, crazy situation, you guys. But a little piece of advice, even if you don't like hassling people, hey Jennifer, even if you don't like hassling people, if you take your car to a shop to get work done, hey Paula, make sure that you actually are following up with them on a regular basis, because I have spent most of my day trying to track down what to do to find my car. It's been in the shop for almost 2 years exactly. I think it went on the 5th or the 6th. And that shop blew up the engine, and then I transferred it to a different shop that was just busy and taking forever, but I didn't have a definite need for the car. So it was like, it's okay, take your time, get other people that are definitely like waiting on their cars, you know, that need them right away to get to work and stuff. Never should have done that. I picked it up last September after a day, like the first trip I took on it other than home. The check engine light came on. So I took it back. They wound up saying it was the timing. They were, again, busy. Didn't hear from them. It'll be fine. You know, I don't have, the kid that has his permit doesn't have his license yet anyway, so it's not like he's driving it anywhere. My daughter is ready to get her permit. She started asking about it. I call them up this morning and the phone's disconnected. I go over there. They've completely cleared the entire lot. The business disappeared. So anyway, that is my crazy story. I've been on the phone with cops and lawyers and all sorts of people today. Probably just going to have to write off as a loss. So anyway, that is where I have been today. Not that you guys really care about that kind of stuff. Not the best way to declutter a car, just saying. especially right now. It's actually going up in value because of the chip shortage. But are any of you guys following along on the Simply Summer Challenge? I did kind of want to ask if you like the new format, if you have been following them. It's definitely getting seen by more people this way. And Paula, so glad to hear that you are doing fine and just had signal issues on Saturday. I was going to say, and so, okay, Paula, I know it's been hot at your house. Jennifer, where you're at, has it been super hot lately? We were like in the 90s last week, but it wasn't too terribly bad. I'm kind of trying to figure out if we have 100-degree temperatures coming because I don't have an AC. So, and Paula, do you happen to know if Karen is going live at 10 tonight, or is she just done with Monday Night Lives, or any idea? That is awesome, Jennifer. So are you having issues with the heat? That's one of those things that I'm trying to do better this year with the heat. Hey, Ray. But like, aside from mosquitoes breaking me out in hives, I'm also having issues with just the heat causing mast cells to degranulate and cause histamine issues. So anyway, I am going to go ahead and jump into this. So I was going to say, I planned this live like 2 or 3 days ago, and my brain has been scattered today. All right, so what makes a food high histamine? You can have foods that are naturally higher in histamine. I believe this would fall into things like strawberries. Okay. Yeah, I don't do well with extreme cold or extreme heat. And I'm fairly new. Well, I've been dealing with vertigo, which is also histamine related. But then I had, until honestly last year was the first time I've really had like problems just due to summer with the heat. So probably because I was home more and we don't have AC. So I don't know for sure if there's like scientific literature on what makes a food high histamine. I know there are various groups that have, hey Khadija, that have tested certain foods and found that they are high histamine. And off the top of my head, I could not tell you exactly which ones they are. I know that strawberries tends to be in that group, and stuff like pineapple. And I want to say tomatoes, but at the same time, I can mitigate that with the pressure cooker, so I don't think it's accurate. But the ones that I've noticed, they tend to be higher acidity foods. But some of that might even be questionable because, like, I know some people can eat pineapple just fine. Pineapple is also high in quercetin. I don't know how to pronounce that word, but you know what I mean. Hopefully. I'm not even sure I have it. Quercetin. I think that's how it's spelled. So anyway, pineapple is also high in that. So like some people are just fine with it. And that's one of those things that I find frustrating with the histamine lists, because if you look at the histamine lists, some things are just going to be, oh, they're super high in histamine. Other things, oh, well, it's a liberator. And the explanation I got on those lists was that if it's a liberator, it means it's going to basically cause you to process that histamine again. What I've kind of come to realize is that a lot of times the liberators are actually the things that cause mast cell degranulation later. So maybe the food is not high histamine, but you have, it's not high histamine, but maybe it's high lectin. You eat it, the lectins go into your intestines, cause issues with the walls of your intestines, and then you've got pieces and particles that are bigger than they should be entering your bloodstream and causing mast cell degranulation. Does that make sense? Are you following me? What I have found after a lot of searching, because I don't know if you guys realize this, there are actually multiple lists. Sorry, I still have to read the stuff to see where stuff goes. So there are different lists with, all right, so like this is the Mast Cell 360 website, and they have stuff listed for oxalates and lectins and various things. But they actually, and that may have actually been a download, they actually don't agree on what is high histamine as compared to the SIGHI list, which is like the one that so many people look at. I just had somebody comment, hey Fordman, on a video that, well, cinnamon is high histamine, and I'm like, really? That's a new one to me. And I started looking. About half the lists say it's high histamine, about half the lists say, no, it's not histamine, it's completely fine. So if I'm processing something like cinnamon through my brain, I reacted to cinnamon for years, what I thought was cinnamon. Hey, Danny, how are you doing tonight? So I reacted to what I thought was cinnamon for years. It'd make me nauseous. It would make me inflamed. I never felt good. I tended to quit eating it, you know? I mean, that just makes sense. If something's making you feel bad, you don't eat it. And then somebody's like, well, where do you get your cinnamon? I don't, because I don't buy it. But what do you mean? They had figured out that they started buying cinnamon from a different place, and they started getting asked about which kind of cinnamon they wanted. And they were clarifying with like Latin names of the plants type of clarification. And it turns out a lot of what is sold as cinnamon in the US is actually cassia. So cassia is a cousin to the cinnamon tree, because cinnamon is actually a bark. cassia contains compounds that are poisonous, whereas cinnamon doesn't. But cassia is also cheaper to produce, and they have the same flavor. And because they're both in the same family, they can get around the labeling because it's like the cinnamonum family. I don't speak Latin, guys. Sorry. So I have, through that process, realized I can eat cinnamon perfectly fine, but it's got to be sourced from a place that I know it's actually cinnamon. So I actually I have an aunt that sent me some from Penzi Spices. I typically just buy it from places that sell both, because if they sell both, they know the difference. But then each of these lists is also basically put together the same way, to my understanding. I think there's one that actually does testing on the food itself to see if it's high histamine. But then beyond that, they basically take a small sample of people and ask them to say whether or not they reacted to that thing. And then that's how they determine if it's low histamine or moderate histamine or high histamine. If they have bad reactions to it, it's high histamine. But they've apparently all been done with fairly small sample sizes. So it makes it difficult to actually look at a list and say, okay, I know they tested things, they've done this with a group of people, and this is right. Well, what I've come Can you guys see me yet? Whew. Sorry, I did not mean to put you in the bright light. Are you here? Okay. I turned off a couple of phones and came out to the kitchen where I'm closer to the router. Hopefully that works. And I am sorry about the dirty dishes. All right. So anyway, from what I have been reading on how the lists were put together, is that each list is basically made by a group of doctors or an organization, like the SIGHI list is Swedish something or other institute, and I forgot my water. Oh well. And then the Mast Cell 360 one is by a mast cell organization here in the States. The thing is, they're all using a small sample size of people. Sometimes they're self-selected. I think actually most of the time those are self-selected, like they have to opt into this study, so it's not a random study. And most of the places don't back that up with any testing of the actual foods. So just because it says it's high histamine, you don't necessarily know that it didn't sit in the refrigerator for 2 days before you ate it, or before they ate it, that kind of thing. So there's not really a good way to gauge how that goes. And I know that's kind of like, well, then what do you look at? So when I was starting out, I did look at the lists, and of course, most of them are not agreeing. So I basically looked at what foods I normally ate. I mean, you know, it just makes sense as to see kind of, you're not going to look up foods that you wouldn't eat normally anyway, because why would you want to eat them if you don't normally eat them? Unless you are to the point you don't have anything else to eat. And then at that point, hopefully there's at least a few that everything agrees on. And there's not a whole lot of those, honestly. And like I mentioned, not all of them are right for everybody. But then I basically started making my own food list, because some things that they said are low histamine, I still react to. And I know now, looking back on it, that a big part of that is because I am dealing with mast cell issues, that lectins play into that. So if something is low histamine, but it's high lectin, the big one I'm thinking of that was listed as a 0 on the SIGHI list when I looked at it the other night is squash. I still can't eat squash. I have not figured out how to denature the lectins, even with the Instant Pot, enough that I cannot have histamine reactions to squash. And that seems to be, it's irrelevant if it's butternut, if it's zucchini or stuff like that. So I've taken squash off of the okay list. Are there things that make me feel worse? Yes. But by creating anything pickled is going to be high histamine. That's why I was trying to figure out why I'm okay eating dill pickles. Dill is good for digestion, but like I even react to vinegar. So anything with vinegar in it, anything that's fermented is naturally high histamine. Even actually, so the lists don't even agree on alcohol. How crazy is that? It's all fermented. Some of them say some things are okay and some of them say some things aren't. But so for me, I got down to the point that, generally speaking, because I started this in the fall, I had hives all summer. So I went down to one meal for a week and a half, 2 weeks. I think it was a week and a half when I introduced the beef and broccoli. But I had 4 things that I knew I wasn't reacting to at that point. Because I had the chicken that I was cooking from frozen in the Instant Pot. I had peas, which I know now are higher lectin. But since I was cooking them, I don't know if it's just I have a mild enough reaction that I don't really react that much to them, or what the deal was with that. And white rice that I also cooked in the Instant Pot. Now, to some degree, things like oxalates or salicylates, I think the lists are probably a little bit more accurate on those, because I think the only way to know that is to test them, is my understanding. And keep in mind, I don't account for those. I've started doing a little bit of research on oxalates just because I still need to do a video on it. But so the way the lists are put together is definitely a huge drawback with them. And that's why I don't follow them. Some things I find that I can actually eat just fine, like avocados. Avocados are low lectin and supposedly high histamine. They're also usually listed as a histamine liberator. I've noticed no issues at all. I don't know, maybe that is because I usually salt them with pink Himalayan salt to eat them if I'm eating them plain. I'm not really sure. I just don't react to them. So they're really good for you, so I went ahead and put them back on my list. Strawberries, I still react to strawberries. I ate them anyway today because I had a bunch out of the garden and I was stressed out. Also not a good time to cheat, but you know. Probably not helping my hives tonight. So why don't I follow a list? Because most of the lists aren't really made with a wide sampling of people, and there's nothing accounting for how those people were picked that they are sampling from. So there's no indication that they might have the same or different root causes from me. I have no idea, Khadija. At this point, I supplement with multiple different vitamins and supplements. I am actually probably overdue for getting micronutrient testing done again. The other issue there is most people with chronic illnesses don't use, how do I want to say that? They don't use vitamins and nutrients in the same way that most people do. With histamine intolerance, one of the root causes is actually vitamin deficiency. So with histamine, you need some just to send signals to your brain and do normal bodily functions. But then after your, yes. So it depends on the food though. And that's one reason why I was picking the foods that I picked when I was planting things in, I think April was my first garden tour. That's why I was picking some of the things that I picked. Brassicas tend to be lower histamine foods, and they also seem to be higher nutrient in the nutrients that you need to produce DAO, which is what our bodies use for about 70% of the pathways to metabolize histamine. So things like radishes are high in vitamin C. One normal size radish has about 2% of your daily normal recommended value of vitamin C. Broccoli is also a major source of sulforaphane, which helps your body process estrogen, and one of my root causes is presumably PCOS. So, and based on the hormonal testing I had done a year and a half ago, I want to say it was right before everything shut down. I might be wrong on that. So anyway, based on that testing, I'm pretty sure I'm estrogen dominant. So, and here recently, for the longest time, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 years, I had not been eating raw cruciferous vegetables, which is the brassica family, other than radish. I maybe you know this. Is there anything different between brassicas and cruciferous vegetables? Are they completely overlapping? Because at this point, I think they are completely overlapping, and one is probably just once it's in the kitchen and one is when it's in the garden. But so that's one reason I was planting things in the garden that will help give me the nutrients I need to produce the DAO I need to process the histamine, because my body goes through those nutrients faster than what a normal person would, because there's usually it's that whole sort of, a normal person just goes about life, whereas if you're dealing with backed up histamine, your body's constantly trying to process and get rid of that histamine. Does that make sense? Okay, they are. you believe they're the same thing too. So that's why in like my supplement regimen, I take rose hips for vitamin C. I take vitamin D. I'm not taking vitamin D right now. You would think I learned better than to switch from a vitamin A, vitamin D combo. What was that, January? when I ran out of the one. I couldn't get vitamin D in a lower dosage again, so what did I buy? Well, I'll just go ahead and take that and make sure I leave a week afterwards before I start taking vitamin D this fall. No! So the last 2 or 3, I caught it earlier, but the first day, I thought I was having a reaction on the roof of my mouth to having eaten something hot. Can I drink moringa? I don't know. I take moringa morning and evening in capsule form. Tea is one of those things. Tea and coffee are both fermented and processing typically. So I was trying to drink more herbal teas and things, and I kept reacting to them, so I just don't even like the idea of drinking tea anymore. So even stuff like I take peppermint every morning as well as the moringa. Moringa is actually a natural mast cell stabilizer. So I do take moringa, I think probably 1,400 milligrams morning and evening. I try and aim to get it about 12-hour intervals, just so because that's actually, so one of my main symptoms is itching. And I actually have a couple different classifications of itching. But the moringa calms the mast cells down. I do eat eggs. I don't eat eggs that are not completely cooked other than in mayo. And I do drink milk. Not nearly as much as I used to. That's why I started working on the water challenge. Not really a challenge. I breathe. So for the longest time, I had gotten, and I started with the hives late spring, early summer of 2019. I was diagnosed with histamine intolerance in the fall of 2019. And I had probably been drinking no water other than at work for the better part of 2 years because I would tend to react to the water. Once I was home due to the stuff going on last year, I tried to start drinking more water because milk is expensive, comparatively. And I started breaking out in hives again. So I went back to not drinking. But when I asked a few other people that had had reactions to water, their main advice was, or what had worked for them, they just never quit drinking it. They'd have anaphylactic reactions to water and they'd just find a different brand. But since, and basically just because, well, they knew it was good for me and they were having those reactions to everything. I never went down to absolutely everything caused histamine issues. There were a few food, but my bucket was to the point I was reacting to, like, I just chronically had hives. So they didn't necessarily get worse after certain meals, if that makes sense. Why do I think I have excess estrogen? Because that is what the testing, when I got a hormone panel done, and based on the time in my cycle, I should have had this ratio of estrogen to progesterone, and it was not that. The estrogen was much higher. The progesterone was much lower. The only thing I eat now that I believe has soy in it, there's two things actually. Unfermented Bragg's liquid aminos, and that I typically only use for a few dishes. If I want to be brave and feed a craving and eat sushi, and then after I have run it through the Instant Pot in teriyaki chicken or beef and broccoli. Now, so I really don't eat a whole lot of soy. I buy at most 1 bag of chicken a week, and I can tell you the bag of chicken from last week is still in the freezer. And I don't even remember what I did with the last bag of chicken before that, but it was not either of those two. And we don't really do sushi very often because we kind of burn ourselves out on sushi. 2018, I think, is when we... Best family date ever. Take your teenagers that like sushi to a sushi making class. It was an expensive class to have all three of us go through it, but I didn't have to fix supper that night. We all know how to make sushi now, and we can make it at home when we want it. Yeah, I don't do well with coconut. So, and coconut aminos are actually fermented, as are regular liquid aminos. Bragg's is the one brand that is unfermented. So I was gonna say, I'm guessing you're kind of going towards like detoxing estrogen and stuff. At this point, I am going through a class with a functional doctor, and working through making sure my body is actually detoxing well as we will actually be looking more in depth at the hormones, how our body responds to them, and getting them into better order next quarter. But no, I do not do well with any of the coconut anything. Depending on what it is, some things give me hives, some things it tastes very unpleasant to me. Like the only thing I taste is coconut, and not in a pleasant way. I don't know how to explain that. It's been so long since I've eaten anything with coconut now that I'm not sure if I had other reactions. The main reactions I wind up with are hives, itching, just sort of a blasé type feel. If it's something that has gluten in it or like that, I will get somewhat bloated, but not terribly anymore because I don't eat a whole lot of anything with gluten. I don't know. Does that answer your question? So anyway, if I was doing this over again, I'm not going to say I wouldn't have looked at the lists, because until you look at the lists, you don't know what's on there. I wouldn't have followed one list for any significant period of time, because I did try to follow the SIGHI list, and I would have started looking at root causes earlier, because I do think it really changes what works and what doesn't. If it's high lectin, I can do something about the lectins in a lot of things, like tomatoes. I can put them in the pressure cooker, cook them, it denatures the lectins, and I can still eat tomatoes. They don't cause me to itch anymore. They don't cause hives. They're fine. In limited quantity over the course of time. So I'm not going to eat, 5 tomato dishes in a week. Just not going to happen. But I would also actually sit down and write out what I try and what I don't, and what reactions I have. And I say I would do that at this point because it would create a list I could give someone else if I needed to say, this is the reaction, this is the conditions, and that kind of thing. Now, I say that, but at the same time, one of the major issues with histamine intolerance is developing disordered eating. How would I say that? It's fairly common to develop disordered eating when you have histamine intolerance, because especially depending on your reactions, it's really easy to become afraid to eat because you're afraid you might react. One of the things for me, and this was an issue before I knew I had histamine issues, and I say before I knew I had histamine issues because vertigo, which is definitely histamine related, I can trace back in my medical paperwork to as early as when I was a teenager. And back then I had no idea what a mast cell was. I had no idea what a histamine reaction was, much less what histamine was. But like, even when I was trying to go through a medically managed weight loss program, tracking food for me in the moment, instead of making me not eat things because I was going to have to report it, I would binge eat. And I would just eat all of the things, anything that crossed my mind, anything. And I would like get to the point I would physically make myself sick because I was eating too much. That was just a very weird, issue. And the only time I've actually worked with a nutritionist. Can you guys not fight, please? Whoever started it, I don't care. Fur babies. They always have to get your attention. So that's also one reason why it's a struggle for me. One of the major things people seem to recommend is going to a nutritionist. In my experience, a nutritionist was not helpful at all. The weeks... Hi, Jennifer. The weeks that I would go to the nutritionist and have lost weight were the weeks that I just ate all sorts of junk and felt horrible. And when I say all sorts of junk, I'm talking, let's have the donuts and the Little Debbie's and get McDonald's for supper and that kind of thing. And then the weeks that I was eating healthy were the weeks that I would gain weight again. And having gone through this now, the advice I was given back then was, oh, well, you're probably just not eating enough calories. I'd eat until I was full or over full. But it was one of those, that was the only thing she could come up with that might be wrong. How are you doing tonight, Jennifer? I haven't gotten a chance to check out your latest video. But I think I swapped out both the beginning and ending tracks on my sleep playlist a couple days ago. And in case you were unaware, I'm also GGM Creates, I think is probably who I typically comment on your videos as. But anyway, and I think if she had known more about like food in relation to chronic illness and that kind of thing, and like inflammation, anti-inflammatory type stuff. Now, granted, I don't think, at least at that point, paleo and ape and some of those were not on my radar at all. But yeah. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling, guys. I am sorry. Do you have questions? But yeah, I highly recommend following your own list that you create with you or possibly with your family if you all have issues. And that's one thing. I am tweaking the things we eat now because my daughter is at this point, I guess you would say lactose intolerant, or has a dairy allergy. I don't know. She hasn't been tested. It does run in her dad's side of the family. So like she's getting advice from her sister and grandmother on what they can eat still. And funnily enough, like she can have cheddar and aged cheeses in small quantities, whereas that's the things that break me out in hives. I can do mozzarella and cream cheese, but the rest of them are sort of off limits, and she's just the opposite. I am fiddling with Post-it notes, which means I am apparently very distractible today. So yeah, I guess the way I see it, it's not that I wouldn't create a list of things that you can eat. It's that I wouldn't follow the ones that somebody else creates blindly. I would start testing them sooner. Because like it had probably been a year before I even tested not squash. I'd been eating squash. And still had minor itchiness and stuff. But that's why you guys don't see squash in my recipes. I do have one more bag of frozen butternut cubes that I might try. Like, I was able to get oats to be okay by pressure cooking them longer. 4 to 5 minutes has been my sort of normal time that works okay. Oats take probably 6 to 8 minutes instead, in order to have me not react to them. But yeah. So do you guys have any questions? I feel like I'm rambling and I don't even know what you guys want to know about. But that's basically why I'm to the point I don't follow a list. I did go ahead and throw a couple of lists down in the description box below. I'm on StreamYard. I don't see a box. Anyway, in the description, there are links to a couple of the histamine food lists. And then I also included an article. It's the blog is Healing Histamine. On YouTube, I believe the channel is Low Histamine Chef. But she actually did write about why she ate some things that were high histamine. And it gets back to the question about how do you know, or do you get what you need nutrient-wise? And a lot of people with histamine intolerance don't. A lot of people with histamine intolerance have gotten down to eating less than 10 foods before they figure out that they've got histamine intolerance. Me, I just kept eating stuff because I always had hives, so I didn't necessarily connect it with food completely. I mean, I knew I reacted badly to some things, but not others. And when I had them all the time, it was like... And part of that was probably due to heat, because I was working in a kitchen that was 90 plus degrees in front of a 600-degree pizza oven. So some of that was probably due to heat rather than food consumption. Some of it was that the food, how do I say this? The food in our kitchens at work, by law, could be used for up to 7 days. And in our kitchens, based on our policy, we could use it for up to 5 days. But the stuff in the EDR would always be pushing that 5-day mark. And then when I decided I was having too many problems with the stuff at work, I was gonna get good at doing this, because that spring I had wound up in ketosis. I was doing really well on paleo. But I wound up in ketosis, and that threw my chemistry out of whack, for lack of a better way to put it. And then that went into the chronic hives, and at the same time, it was like, okay, if I need to eat more carbs, because I had talked it over with a couple people and they decided, oh, well, you're probably having this happen, so see if bumping your carbs up makes a difference. Well, I had been eating a salad bar. There's not a whole lot of carbs on a salad bar. And what I could get for soups was often not gluten-free. So it was like, unless I could go get, honestly, what I would often get, I would go get desserts out of the free cooler. If you ever have a chance to go to Four Winds Casino and you happen to see peanut butter pie cake on the buffet, definitely get it. That is an amazing dessert that I absolutely love. I don't know that they're still making it. Our pastry chef only did it occasionally because I guess it was seasonal, because it was more labor intensive. But anyways, I digress. Or I would have to pay and go through the hotline, and usually my options were like mashed potatoes, to stick with the gluten-free thing. Yum to the peanut butter pie cake, or to the mashed potatoes. The peanut butter pie cake was truly awesome. I do have the recipe for that. I've never gotten around to actually trying to make it. Anywho, neither here nor there. But so then it's like, okay, it's stupid to pay to go through the hotline to just get mashed potatoes when I knew how the mashed potatoes were made, and it's like, there's nothing special to these mashed potatoes. So I started deciding to get into meal prep. And I would prep a week's worth of meals for lunches at once and stick them in the refrigerator. I'm pointing over here because my fridges are over there. Both of them. I have too many fridges. One of them freshly cleaned. But anywho, my kids did the other one last week. But it would sit in the refrigerator all week and build up histamine. So, I guess the short answer for advice if you're starting out with histamine intolerance issues, freeze all your leftovers. Like, dish it all up for your meal. Whatever's left, go ahead and put it, have a good night, Khadija. Go ahead and put it in containers. And then after your meal, throw it in the freezer. Because at that point, it drastically slows down the histamine for, I want to say it's histidine is transformed into histamine, which is what your body deals with. It slows it down to just about nothing. So that would take care of a lot of issues. And then start working on your list, like one meal at a time. And that's really what I have done and how I've sort of progressed through the Foodie Friday videos is the different meals that, at least in the beginning, they were the meals that I made at the beginning of my journey that I knew were safer. So, and we are looking at just about 10 o'clock. Ray, do you happen to know if Forever Best Friend is still live or if Karen is live now? So yeah. And Ray, that's one reason you were getting all sorts of questions about keto from me, was basically because I want to stay out of keto because it has screwed me up in the past. And I didn't really I didn't do the keto flu thing when I was doing well on paleo. I got more of that when I went gluten-free, in all honesty. I didn't know what it was back then. I just felt horrible. Or RVDJ would be another one. She was live when I started, but I don't know. She's normally off by now. So yeah. I guess another way to say why I don't follow a list is because if I just followed the list, I would miss out on fruits and vegetables and things that I actually don't react to and provide vital nutrients. I was going to say, I'm sitting here going, I don't actually know what the nutrient profile on like a tomato is, but I know like cooked tomatoes have lycopene, and it's one of the few places that is, mainly just because the ketchup market has added that to their marketing. But if you narrow your foods down for a long time, it's really easy to become nutrient deficient. So if I had blindly followed a list, all of the lists, I would have a lot more problems than what I probably do now. All right, so it is top of the hour. Let's go raid Charlie Grace at Forever Best Friend, and I will see you guys, I want to say tomorrow for my premiere at 2. I can't guarantee that's going to happen. It will depend on what goes on as far as the car and talking to the PI, and how long all that takes, if I can get everything done in time. But otherwise, I will be on at 10 p.m. Thursday night. Thank you all for coming. Hopefully, I wasn't too rambly and confusing. I will see you guys Thursday, if not before. And thank you for dropping links, Ray.